I started dyeing my hair when I was 14, 15 ish. And that was also like such a huge thing. Like my grandma legit didn't eat for 3 days. Like she was getting physically sick because she was like so embarrassed that her grandchild does something like this. And I just didn't care. Like it was like, no, I will dye my hair pink, I will dye my hair blue, I will, I had all of that. And
So before we move on from the gay topic, I'm wondering if you have any turning moments that you want to share that played a role in you, like accepting your identity, accepting yourself. I don't know.
Yes and no. I feel like for me it happened like very organically and very, slowly but surely. Because I said, like, as a child, I was like this little gender non-conforming badass kiddo. And I feel like that has been taken away from me after I entered school. And then I think as soon as I maybe was not even like sure, or like I was not, 100% comfortable with like certain definitions, how I should label myself. However, I had this, cliche, but like I had this like very like fighting teenage spirit. And I remember like one moment, for example, where I was definitely not out yet, but I was, there was an interview in a local newspaper with me. And it was about like some photos that I took while I was traveling in the USA. And I was like, that was a family trip. I was like 16, 17. And don't even ask me how I got to this newspaper, because looking back, it's so random. However, they decided to like make a little interview with me.
Nice.
Good. And then there was about like the photos. There was about like questions about like myself and like little teenage me. I had this like huge rant about how I think that like the people in our village are like close-minded and boring, and hypocrisy, like the hypocrisy among like their Christian conservatism. Okay. And it was around the time where I was still going to church and I was still like member of this community. And are you familiar with Eurovision?
Yeah.
Okay. So in 2014, Conchita Wurst, the Austrian drag queen, won Eurovision. It was like an absolute iconic moment. And she was basically like this very elegant lady with a huge beard. So it was like, I think like if she would have been like fully female presenting, like people would have been much more like okay with her. But because like she was having a beard, it was like the topic for a long time. And I just wrote like in the interview, like in the newspaper, like I just like called people out for like, being transphobic or like criticizing her and like, and I read this interview actually like maybe a month or two ago. I never touched it back. Like I never, I read it when it came out. It was like, okay. And then for the next 10 years, it was like, I'm not dealing with this. And I read it back and I was like, wow, I did that, like I and now I'm not even sure if I had the courage to do so. But like back then I was just like, I don't care. Yeah. I'm like this naive, I don't know.
Yeah, you did it and then you knew that you had done something weird, so you didn't look at it again.
Yeah, I think I was not able to be proud of it, although I think like now I'm very, very proud that like I did it. But like I started dyeing my hair when I was 14, 15 ish. And that was also like such a huge thing. Like my grandma legit didn't eat for 3 days. Like she was getting physically sick because she was like so embarrassed that her grandchild does something like this. And I just didn't care. Like, it was like, no, I will dye my hair pink. I will dye my hair blue. I will, I had all of that. And I also had like teachers who were like asking very inappropriate questions to my friends about like regarding my identity or like whether they like it or not. Like, it was a topic, like no one really know how to deal with that. And I don't know, like for me probably there was this element of like I want to like provoke a little bit, but I think that's normal with like teenagers. But that was like a very important like self expression for me. And I have to say, like, I also like think that a lot of times I could have been like braver person. My coming out was fairly late, because I have a bit of like a troubled relationship with the idea of having to come out, because I just refuse this idea that like in the heteronormative society everyone expects you to be straight and you have to have this moment of like I need to come out. And then I had for a long time I was like, okay, if I have a relationship, I will just like I'm not gonna hide it, then will be the moment where I will like tell my family.
Nice.
Like, yeah,
I like that.
well, that never happened.
Okay. Single
and ready to mingle. But it just took different ways in the end. And I feel like I could have like stood up more, or like later in like high school when there was like other like gays who I necessarily didn't like, but I feel like they've been bullied. I could have stand up more, but it's so complex. Like, you have to be coming to terms with your own sexual or gender identity first in order to be able to like step up for other people effectively. And like, I feel like I tried my best. There are definitely shortcomings, but eventually it just developed like over time, very naturally, very slowly. I was labeled gay before I knew it. So I think a lot of my friends already like had this idea. Maybe they also didn't know how to address it. And luckily I have to say that like I lost 0 friendships. Like, I didn't lose anyone, just because, I came out.
Yeah.
Eventually.
This concept of coming out, I guess I'm not that familiar with it, like in the sense that I don't really know how it goes or how it's assumed like it's supposed to go, but I imagine it's never so simple unless someone goes to Instagram or Facebook and says I'm gay, and says it to everyone they know. Then you have to come out like 100 times to each person, or no?
That is such a great point again. Like, you never stop coming out in your life. Like, you will always have to, have these conversations over and over again, if you choose to. But yeah, it's such an individual experience. Some people have this moment where they gather the family and they make the speech of like, mom, dad, everyone, I'm gay. That was not comfortable with me. And until this day, I'm actually like not out to some family members. I'm not making a secret out of it. It's something that bothers me. I think like this is also one of the shortcomings that I have to, criticize in my own life, that I have certain family members where I never had this talk, or like relatives. And like in Hungary, like family is a bit more, important. Like, it has a different like standing than maybe like in Germany in that sense. And, like even with like relatives who are like not that close to me, I hate being 25 and maybe like answer the question of like when I'm gonna marry a woman, when I'm like, are you blind? Like, what? Girl. And then I have to play along, and I hate that. But on the other hand, I know that like there is a reason why I didn't come out to them. And it's super complex, I think. And I think a lot of gay or like queer people are living in similar situations. And that's, nothing to be ashamed of. It's not ideal. But yeah, that's kind of like my coming out. Yeah. I ended up actually doing my coming out in a newspaper. That was also so random. Like, I was at the protest in Budapest, and it was against the LGBT law. And then, super randomly, a German a journalist found me, and they asked me to do an interview. And I did the interview with like the most, like it's the most normal thing ever. And it was for a big newspaper. And, like I didn't even give it a second thought. I was just like, yeah, I'm gay. I'm in Hungary. Like, I will leave to Germany and so on. And then when I went home, I realized, everyone in Germany is going to read this. Like people will know about this. And then I was just like, okay, well, it's kind of iconic, to come out like this.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and it was, like it was so cute. I had like such a warm feedback.
So people that you knew saw it and they messaged you? Well,
it was exactly how I thought it's gonna turn out. And it was like actually people then messaging me of like, hey, David, I'm so sorry that like we never talked about this, or like I never addressed this, but I just saw like this interview in the newspaper. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. They were proud of me.
That's so awesome.
And that felt really great. I feel like that was a moment where I was like, wow, I have not been seen like this in my life, and this feels very great. So, yeah.
Amazing. So it seems like a good segue into what's going on in Georgia right now.
Yeah.
So like, so we talked about how the protests are going on because there was an election recently, and the elections were probably rigged, and this, which we talked about a lot on the episode with Sophie that was posted last week, about this Georgian dream government that's in power, and they're very conservative and right wing and among many other ways we could describe them. But one law that's being passed on after this weekend is it's removing rights from LGBT community.
So it's basically it is again like similar than in Russia or in Hungary. It is often people refer it to as like the anti-LGBT law. Officially, it has a different name. It's about protecting children and like traditional family values. And here in Georgia, the law will have like severe consequences. You're basically not allowed to show any kind of queerness in public, in schools, or in events. You cannot do gatherings. So it's like compared to the law in Hungary, it's much more, invasive in also like your private life. But we don't really know, like how these things will go eventually, what the consequences will be. Probably I'm advising everyone to do their own research regarding the legal text, but I'm just saying
we can put a link in the description.
Yeah, that would be nice
for some Georgian.
I'm not trying to spread like false information, but like
we know we're not professionals.
Exactly.
We're talking about our experiences.
Yeah.
Here.
The core thing about this law is that they basically, in the name of protecting families and children, they want to swipe everything that is like outside this heteronormative spectrum out of the private and out of the public. Unfortunately, this is not how reality works. And yeah, there is really like a lot of speculation how these things will turn out, but it's definitely a very huge step back for Georgia.
Yeah. So the question is, how does it feel for you to be here at this time?
It's almost like a PTSD moment, because I faced this already, and like even though like I criticize Hungary a lot, we have still this more or less lucky position to be in the European Union, for example. I love to criticize how they fail actually to take legal actions against these, human rights violations. There is a lot of shortcomings on side of the EU. However, like Hungary was not able to pass a law to this extent like they did in Georgia. But I think I'm 100% sure that they would have done it if they could have done it. But in a sense, it still has to be...
What do you mean this extent?
Like, because like in Hungary, this law, yes, that's very important for context. It is also against, like it is for protecting children, but it only limits it in like school settings, for example. And there is like the biggest focus is on school and sexual education, where you, it's nonsense. Like, for example, if you're doing like sexual education for like kids and you teach them about like what sex is, and someone has a question about like, okay, but what if like, I don't know, two persons of the same gender do it? The teacher is kind of not allowed to answer, because if they give an answer to that, they are committing a crime, because it is forbidden to even mention that, for example, like gay identities exist, that gay sex exists. Now, okay, she does it, but there is like a very blurred line what the consequences could be, but they could be actually fired from their job. If someone, has a problem, they make a case about this, and then, it has a lot of different outcomes. But this is a prime example, this law of like, it has like such so many layers, and like it's also combined with like other laws together. And the whole logic is this gray zone of keeping people in fear, so they just not say anything. Now, for example, if a student approaches this teacher in private and asks the same questions, they're again, allowed to talk about this theoretically. But on an institutional level, it is highly problematic, because like even like, sexual education, it is not in this like comprehensive or like holistic way of like, also about like consent or like, sex, not just as a tool of reproduction. But often in schools, that's all you hear. And you hear about like, I don't know, different like diseases or like infections that you can get. And not, that like sex is a normal thing and everyone does it and, it's totally normal. But coming back to the actual question, in Hungary, it focuses more on like school settings, or if you also like go in a bookstore and there is a book, like Heartstopper was a good example for that. You have to put the book into a foil, like a plastic foil. So
Heartstopper is the name of a book?
Yes, it's like a gay teenage romance book. Okay. And it's been like big on Netflix and so on. And like in Hungary, you have to like put it in a different segment into a store, where you have to put like the 18 sign that children cannot access it, and then it's like wrapped in foil. But this is also like a very gray legislation. Like some bookstores decide to like not to do it, then they get fined. Other books do it, they get not fined. So like it's like this whole like inconsistency about it. But what they definitely achieve with that, for example, like publishing companies, they don't dare to publish like things with LGBT topics, for example.
They're less likely to. They know
because it's just such a big risk. Yeah. Like you will get like fined, high fines,
and they won't sell as much because they can't advertise their books.
However, if we talk about child protection, what is not regulated at all is like pornography on the internet. Like, that is actually something harmful.
Yeah.
Domestic violence is also like a huge topic in Hungary, a huge problem. And that's why I'm arguing like these are like pseudo-Christian arguments of like, they don't serve the children. Like I myself, like if I had like access, or like if I had a person to talk to, or if I had like information like accessible growing up about like what it means to be gay, that would have helped me so much. And you know, even like in Hungary, we have also another law which is similar to the one also in Georgia, because in Georgia it's also prohibited for like make gender affirming surgeries or healthcare for trans people. Like it will all be shut down. And in Hungary we had the legal recognition of you know, when someone changed their gender in their official documents, and in 2020 that was also taken away. So it's again is intersection of identities that, for example, a trans person who is also relying on medical assistance and, you know, like the whole healthcare system to help them out, if you already take away that kind of rights for them, it's maybe less, you know, tragic if you can, you know, not learn about it in school, because like such a big important part of your like on the journey of your identity has been taken away from you, that you will not be able to do it with your documents, and or like medically, they're not necessarily connected, but I mean this laws in Hungary, you have to understand, and that's the same thing in Georgia, it is a discriminatory law, both countries from a Russian legal text. However, you have to see it in the bigger picture, because Georgia passed this law, for example, while aiming to join the EU. Like they were in the process. They still had the candidacy recommendation and so on. So why now? And why them?
Yeah.
So it's definitely like not about, you know, protecting anyone.
It's more about keeping Georgia out of the EU, or...
For example, it's definitely something that you can mobilize on, because like a lot of people would still vote for joining the EU, but they would probably have like negative attitudes towards trans people. So if you pass a law saying like, yeah, you cannot do like, you know, legal recognition, or you're officially like you don't get health care as a trans person, they think that like you're doing something actually good, and this is like, I don't know, something weird coming from the West, and you're protecting like traditional families. And I mean, there is such a great gay nightlife in Tbilisi, and embedded with the techno culture, which is also super political. I love it. Yet we don't know how this is going to be after December. So it's all like, you know, combined, and these are like, in my opinion, this is more about like political tools where you can like mobilize voters. And
what does mobilize mean?
Like, for example, like if you say that you want to protect children, that is something that no one would go out and be like, no, let's not protect children.
Right.
So people will vote for you. And that's similar also like that our government is doing, that they're always in this like savior role of like, vote for us because we're going to protect you from something bad.
Yeah.
And I think the logic behind this is very similar in Georgia as well.
Okay. So that answers my question. I think we could wrap it up there. What do you think?
Yeah, sure.
Great conversation. I'm really happy to have had this and to get to know you better.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, thank you so much for having me. Really, I was so happy when you like asked, and I hope that I can contribute a little bit to like maybe also like people understanding Georgia, of course, from like at least our point of view.
For sure.
Or about like Hungary, like. I feel like everything like I do, or when I talk about these things, it's coming definitely from like a place of love, and not because like I want to paint anything, you know, necessarily negative.
That's
like,
nice.
There are so many beautiful, talented people also in Hungary, like also here in Georgia. I mean, like especially in my bubble in Georgia, but you know, if I have to go back home, I feel like I criticize it a lot. That's necessary critique.
Yeah, it's because you care about the people.
Well, I do care, yeah.
And you're worried about how these societal pressures, how these systems, how these governments are affecting the people you love and care about, and stopping them from doing what they what they do. Right?
Yeah, that's a very good summary.
Mm.
So I'm gonna shut up and, just say thank you again.
Okay, thank you for listening. And there will be information for further. There will be links to further information in the description, and we will continue this deep dive into German, Hungarian, Georgian, gay identity.
Cool.